All right. Council will now resume its public session after a brief recess. And the first discussion item is item 1 on the agenda, the Integrity Officer Investigation Application, and the recommendation that the preliminary report of the Integrity Officer on the request for an investigation from Terrence Young be received and that direction be provided to the Integrity Officer whether to carry out a further investigation. And as the matter concerns me, in order to avoid any appearance of a perceived conflict, I plan to absent the chair. The acting mayor for the month is Councillor Giddings, and he will chair this session of the meeting. And when you're done with the item, I would appreciate being called so that I can resume my duties.
So item 1, the Integrity Officer Investigation Application. Madam Clerk, do we have a presentation?
Mr. Chair, Mr. Robert Swayze, the Integrity Officer for the town, is with us this evening and is able to present his findings and answer any questions of council. Mr. Swayze can come to the microphone.
Is there any questions that you may have?
We have questions from council. Councillor Khan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Swayze. I've read your report, and obviously one of the items on the report were allegations against me, which you've outlined that you have no jurisdiction over, so I have no qualm sitting here and asking you questions about it or even voting on the matter. Your report, prior to distributing this report, did you distribute a draft version of this report, or was this the final version?
This was the only version that I distributed to the town.
Sorry, let me turn this off.
That was the only version that I distributed to the town.
Now, did you happen to review our meeting online, at which point this matter was referred to your office?
I read the report that went to council, but I didn't review the meeting. Is it taped, or is that what you mean?
It is taped. I was just wondering whether or not you reviewed it in the course of putting together the report. All right, so there's some housekeeping questions I want to ask you. Maybe you can shed some light or give some recommendations. One of the issues that I've had, and I raised it at that meeting as well, was the affidavit. I've always believed that there should be one affidavit. If you want to turn to page 35 of the report. Are you there?
Yes, I have a copy of the request for investigation. I have a copy of the complaint.
You see over here where Mr. Young, right below where it says make oath and say, it says number 1, I have personal knowledge of the facts?
Yes.
Okay, and then he goes on to say number 3. I believe he's referring to paragraph 3 of his exhibit. Are you with me?
I see a affidavit number 3 only. I see that notation.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that that means paragraph 3 of his exhibit.
I don't see a paragraph 3. I'm sorry, I'm not with you through the chair.
Do you have Schedule A with you?
Khan.
Do you have Schedule A?
I have Appendix A.
Madam Clerk, can we get him a copy of the report so he can follow with it?
I have it here.
Mr.
I
Chair,
have it
through
here.
you, I believe the confusion right now deals with the fact that Mr. Swayze has his report without the benefit of having it within the agenda package. And the page reference that Councillor Khan has made is the agenda package and not Mr. Swayze's report. So he now has a full copy of the agenda in front of him.
Yeah, they're both the same.
Follow me with the agenda package,
Right.
okay? So if you can turn to page 38.
Yes, I have that.
See the number 3 there?
Yes, I do.
Okay. Those are allegations against Mayor Burton. All right? My name's not mentioned there. I'm going to ask you to go back to the affidavit, please. Then it says, I have reasonable and probable grounds to believe that a member of town council, again, it says Mayor Rob Burton. My name's not mentioned there. On the bottom, it says, the particulars of which are as follows. Is the first time my name is mentioned in this affidavit. My concern here is, first of all, he doesn't state in his affidavit that he has allegations against me. And if he does state it, he packages it up with allegations against the Mayor Burton. My question to you is, would it not be more appropriate going forward that we have separate affidavits against each complainant? Against each person there's allegations being made against. The reason for that is that if you have 2 or 3 or 12 people on this affidavit, and you believe that 1 or 2 might have some sort of legitimacy, you have to refer the entire package to the Integrity Commissioner. You can't parse it out. Would you agree that would it be your recommendation that there should be a separate affidavit for each person that's named?
Yes, for each person that is complained about, yes. I agree with that.
Thank you. Well, and maybe we'll make note of that when we change our bylaws. In his affidavit and in Mr. Young's exhibits, he makes the allegations that Mayor Burton canceled certain meetings, including committee meetings, to benefit my federal campaign. Now, I understand that you reviewed emails, you've looked at some preliminary evidence. Was there any suggestion at all that these meetings were canceled for my benefit?
Not in those emails that I recall, no.
So to date, from what you reviewed, it's pure speculation.
Let me review the complaint.
Please take your time.
That is,
Right, and my question to you is there,
I think you, did you push me right up? Yeah, your mic's on. Try again. Huh.
okay. No, I understand what the allegations are. I read those as well. My question to you is there any evidence so far that you reviewed that supports those allegations?
no. But I haven't done an investigation, of course.
I understand that.
I just reviewed emails.
Here's a concern that I have, and maybe you can provide recommendations here. The problem that I have right now is I could make all sorts of allegations. Let me just take Councillor Adams for instance. He's a friend of mine, so he'll appreciate that. I don't mean any malice here. I could make all sorts of allegations against him in an affidavit, okay? And these become part of a public record. They get distributed in the agenda. You review that affidavit and any exhibits attached there too, okay? And then you report back. And when you report back, you repeat those lurid allegations. Okay, you stated out what the allegations are. And at the very end, you write a line that I have no jurisdiction to review this matter. Are you concerned that this might be open to abuse?
I don't understand. I mean, all I'm doing is explaining what I'm speaking to by reiterating what the complaint is, and then I'm indicating that I have no jurisdiction.
I'm not suggesting for a second that you've engaged in any sort of impropriety. I'm saying that the entire process could be open for abuse.
Yes, yes, and in fact, I recommended to council that you put in a moratorium during the municipal election, just for that reason.
And that's actually where I was going next. You did, in your letter dated June 22nd, 2010, you suggested that no complaints be made or undertaken by the Integrity Commissioner by August 1st, I believe?
Yes.
What was the rationale for that?
To ensure that any complaints were legitimate complaints and not for for election purposes, political purposes.
Now, that only dealt with the municipal elections, right?
And time limited as well, yes.
But you understand that this process can also be exploited outside of municipal elections for provincial and federal elections.
Yes.
Would it be your recommendation to council that those two levels of government also be included?
I haven't thought about it.
The principle is still the same. It's open for exploitation, whether it's at the municipal level or provincial or federal level.
And it becomes a public record, even though I could refuse to investigate, but it becomes a public record. And sure, it's open to abuse. But I'm not sure I'd recommend. I'd like to think about that. I'm not sure I'd recommend that be extended to all other elections.
In reviewing your report, given the timing of the allegations were made in the middle of a federal campaign, and given the fact that you appreciate that you had no jurisdiction, and your report, which suggests that this system might be open for abuse, did you ever, in your belief or assumption, come to the conclusion that this might be being used for political gain?
I don't think there was any doubt that there was political overtones to everything that was in this affidavit.
Thank you. Here's what I don't understand. Mr. Young has alleged that the mayor used his letterhead, or may have used his letterhead, for a release supporting my federal nomination. You understand that, right?
I understand that. I don't know that, though. I haven't investigated.
Not that I'm accepting for a second that it's true, but even if it was true, what's inappropriate about that?
Well, I think I said in my report that it doesn't imply that the town is taking a political position in the election, but it is confusing, and it's using an office, using some influence, which might be confusing to the public, to the electorate.
Are you suggesting that it's inappropriate? I mean, it's his letterhead. He may use it as he wants, can he not?
I believe it's town letterhead.
Okay, it's a town letterhead. Can the mayor use it as he wants?
He can use it for official duties.
Official duties related to as the mayor?
Yes.
All right, so why is the government of Canada involved in this?
In what respect?
This complaint's coming from the government of Canada, is it not?
Now, it's coming from an individual by the name of Terrence Young, I believe.
Are you sure it's not coming from the government of Canada?
I don't see any allegation in here that he's representing the government or the government has any position.
Sorry, it's coming from Terrence Young as an individual?
That's what I believe, yes.
Sir, I think you're mistaken. Can the clerk put this up on the overhead, please?
Oh, are you talking about the letter the subsequent letter? Yes, I have a copy of that. That's okay, I have one. Yes, good point.
What's the logo on the top?
House of Commons.
Right, is that coming from the federal government?
It appears to be, yes.
All right, and that's something that you'd be concerned about, the inappropriateness of using a letterhead.
Yes.
So Mr. Young is alleging that the mayor used an inappropriate letterhead while he uses his own letterhead as an MP.
Point taken.
Thank you. You can take that letter off, please. Okay, if I can ask you to turn to page 33. Thank you.
Yes?
Okay. Under number 2, it says in October of 2010, you investigated this matter about any sort of wrongdoing on my part. Is that correct?
No, that's not correct.
Explain then, please.
I received an email and I responded to the email.
But it says I was consulted by the clerk and another councillor in October of 2010 regarding the purchase of tickets by Oakville Hydro for this dinner and advised the clerk that Oakville Hydro is not a local board.
Correct.
At that time, you advised the clerk and a councillor.
Well, I responded to an email.
You responded to an email.
Yes.
And you responded to an email for, to the clerk and to a councillor.
I'm not sure I advised the counselor. I did advise the clerk, though.
You advised the clerk that there was no jurisdiction.
Yes.
All right. It's interesting that you advised the clerk, and I've spoken to that councillor. That councillor also said that you advised that councillor that you had no jurisdiction over this matter.
I don't recall whether I did it directly or whether I did it through the clerk. I don't recall whether I did it directly or through the clerk.
Here's what I'm troubled by. If you've told the clerk that you have no jurisdiction, and you've told that councillor that you have no jurisdiction, when the matter came to the floor, whether or not this should be referred to you, why would it be referred to you?
I answered my emails, Councillor Khan. That's all I did, and I didn't dock at the time against the town.
I'm not suggesting that you engaged in any sort of impropriety, but this councillor and the clerk were aware that you had no jurisdiction.
Well, I advised them that. Yeah, I advised the clerk that, yes.
Nonetheless, it was forwarded to you again.
Oh, now you mean?
Exactly.
Yes.
Does that not concern you that once you've already ruled that you have no jurisdiction, the matter proceeds?
Well, it's part of the complaint. I'm dealing with the complaint, so I have to deal with all facets of the complaint.
Now, when you dealt with this matter in October of 2010, okay,
Yes.
This matter wasn't referred to you by council.
No, it was not.
So it was, someone can either ask for advice or make a formal complaint.
No, there was no formal complaint. It was merely a request for advice.
Right. And under our bylaws, you are to charge for that advice.
I didn't, but...
And charge at all for that advice?
No,
All right.
I don't believe so.
Well, because I've spoken to the clerk earlier today, and I was advised that you didn't charge,
I did not charge, yes, that's right.
that you had charged for that.
I don't recall, but I don't believe so. In
Madam-
any event,
Excuse me,
the way my...
like that clarification from Madam Clerk?
Just to clarify that, on this occasion, there was no charge at all. There was charges for advice on a separate matter. I thought I had clarified that earlier. So on the issue of the hydro allegations, council was requesting whether or not the integrity officer could investigate that complaint, and I did contact the integrity officer at that time, which preceded a report from the legal department and the internal auditor, which council has actually dealt with. There was another issue on advice that was charged for that preceded that date.
Thank you for that clarification. All right. I also understand that in your report, you make it very, very clear that there's no solicitor-client privilege.
That's true.
Now, and did you make notes contemporaneously when you were consulted by this counselor? Did you make handwritten notes?
Yes, I did.
And you still have those, right?
And I logged it as well.
You've logged
I don't have them with me, but
you
yes.
still have those notes. Okay.
Yes.
All right. This is just my formal demand that you preserve copies of those notes, any emails, and any other documentation that you may have. They may be relevant in a court of law.
Sir, I wouldn't destroy them under
Thank
any
you very much.
circumstances.
I appreciate that. Thank you, sir.
Councillor Elgar.
Thank you very much. My questions are going to be much simpler. When I read the report, I noticed you're asking for $10,000 to go to the next step.
That's an estimate.
And, pardon?
That's an estimate.
Yeah, I absolutely, I know it could go higher, but, or lower.
Or lower.
They normally don't with legal, though. But on the bottom of page 32, you say, "Council may wish to instruct me to do an investigation of the issuance of media release and the extent to which the town resources were used by the mayor." And I'm just wondering, why you wouldn't have asked the clerk if the town sent out a media release on this issue. Like, it seems to me it would be like a 1-minute question, and you could get an answer from staff.
But I don't think that's the, and through the chair again, I don't think that's the complete answer. There's a question of using of town resources. The letterhead is one thing, but the use of town resources I don't even know if there's communications staff in the town, whether he used town communications staff to issue the release. I don't know if he used his own staff in his office. I haven't done an investigation.
It's just interesting what you just said. So you already know in your mind that he sent out an official release?
No.
Oh, because you just said, who he used for that release.
No, I only have allegations, Councillor.
Oh, the alleged release? Yes. Okay. Anyway, I would have thought that would have been pretty easy to get an answer from staff on that.
But it wouldn't be a total answer, is my...
Right. Now, I assume before you responded to this, you looked at our procedural bylaws that we have as council.
I did.
And when I read the top of page 34, you state, "The mayor likely exceeded his authority and should have had his staff do a telephone poll of council before asking staff to cancel." Now, do you have the procedural bylaw to know what the rules are, what you're supposed to do to cancel a meeting?
Yes.
And what does it say in Oakville?
It's a joint authority to the clerk and the mayor if there are insufficient items on the agenda. And I have the procedural bylaw here, I believe.
Yeah, and you're right. And the clerk shall cancel the meeting and provide the public notice accordingly. My question is, I don't see anything in our procedural bylaw that refers to them going around and doing a telephone poll of council.
No.
And I'm trying to understand, since we're working with rules and regulations, and especially you being lawyer procedure, the procedure you've already said was followed, but you didn't say that. I'm trying to figure out why you would say that when it's not part of the procedure.
It's not part of the procedure, but it would have been a good idea to poll council at the time. I mean, it would have helped. That's all I'm saying. It's not part of the procedure, you're right. It would have to be a council meeting, a proper council meeting, and voted on.
Like, there was no need to do any of that. Actually, if you read what was done and what you said was done and what the procedure says was done to 100%. Correct?
No,
Well,
I don't know if if the business of the town was affected by those cancellations. I don't know how many items were slated for that agenda. I don't know if any of them were important. I don't know. I know that, at least I'm told, that staff indicated that they could be postponed. I don't know the impact on the town's business by postponing them.
Okay,
without an investigation.
but at least you did read that staff did say there's no problem, they could be postponed.
Correct, yes.
Okay, so staff told you they could be postponed.
Yes.
The procedural bylaw was such that everything was done to the nth degree, and yet you kind of insinuate
But
that...
that's not what the bylaw says. The bylaw says that if there are insufficient items, there were sufficient items. There was no suggestion that the meeting would be canceled, as I understand it, except for the mayor's request.
Mayor's request as to whether they needed a meeting.
No, of staff could we cancel, I believe the wording was.
Staff came back with the answer, yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A couple quick points. First of all, I wonder if we could ask Mr. Swayze just to review the nature of his engagement, what exactly he was asked to do at this juncture. Because I think we're sort of jumping from advice into investigation in one meeting. So if you could just ask Mr. Swayze just to review the nature of his engagement, just to refresh everybody's memory.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, this is a preliminary report, and I'm to advise you on such things as cost and whether an investigation is appropriate and the rest. But I haven't done an investigation, but I had access to these emails, and I just put that in my report because it gave some flesh to the issue.
So you haven't actually conducted an investigation beyond documentary review?
Correct.
And you found no finding of fault at this point, or
I haven't found
innocence?
anything, really, because
Okay.
all I have is allegations and a preliminary report.
Okay, and just review, so what did you actually do between the time you got the, between the time you got the engagement to today, or to the time you submitted the letter? What did you actually, I don't need a docket, minute-by-minute explanation, but can you just give us like a broad overview of what your actions would have been?
I read the complaint. I reviewed the procedural bylaw. I reviewed some emails that the clerk sent to me and wrote the report.
Okay, and so what would happen, should council refer all or a portion of this evening, what then happens?
You mean if I'm directed to?
If you're directed beyond this
Which of
evening?
the issues are you talking about?
Any of them. So what would I'm just looking for a generic understanding of what the next step would be if there was to be a next step.
I would interview appropriate staff members. I would interview appropriate council members. I might even have a meeting with Mr. Young. And I would look at documentary evidence, and I would draw some conclusions and write a report.
Would those interviews be under oath or simply just
No,
conversations?
it wouldn't be, not yet. The act is going to be changed, as I understand it, and I will be able to do that under oath without too much cost. Now it's very costly.
Okay, so your estimate of $10,000, what is that based on? Is that based on investigating all of the issues or
All, yes.
all of them?
Yes.
And so let me just go back to the previous question. So the next step, if there was to be next, so we have two options. We can receive and file, I assume, correct?
Yes.
We can refer the entire document for further investigation, or we can refer a portion of the document for further investigation.
Well, I've only suggested that there are two of the complaints that could be investigated.
Okay, so we can refer 1, 2, or none?
Correct.
Okay. And the $10,000 is what you assume based on both?
Yeah,
Reviewing both
that
of
would be the maximum, yes.
Okay. I just had another question that just slipped my mind here. So what happens, so you go through the investigation, at the end of the day, you either decide that there's nothing to it or that there's something to it. So what happens at that point? You're going to present another report to council?
Yes.
And what would that look like?
It would detail the findings that I've made as a result of my investigation. It would make a recommendation as to whether there was any sanctions that I'm recommending, anything like that.
Could it also suggest potential changes to procedures and policies?
Yes, I've always felt that the Code of Conduct is kind of a living document, and we're learning as we go through it.
So I guess my next question is, and I've heard the discussion from both my colleagues, Councillor Khan and Councillor Elgar, and they seem to be delving into the facts behind the case. And I'm not sure, is this an appropriate venue? Is this an appropriate time to do that? I'm not suggesting they were acting inappropriately. What I want to know is, can I ask questions about the specifics of this investigation? Can I ask details about what's actually in some of these areas? So in the two areas that you suggest there may be something to investigate, can I ask you details about that right now based on what you know? Is that appropriate?
I indicated that I would be interviewing
No,
appropriate counselors, but I don't know how
I guess
much
what
further
I'm
do you
saying
want
is
to go?
tonight, is it appropriate for me to be asking you specific questions about some of your comments in this document?
Sure.
Okay. So can we just get back to the line of questions that you got from Councillor Elgar for a second with respect to the cancellation of meetings? So I just want to be perfectly clear here. I don't have a copy of the procedural bylaw in front of me. I wish I did. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. So there seems to be, Councillor Elgar was suggesting that the test was met. I believe that's essentially what he was. I'm summarizing what he said, but you're suggesting that the mayor may have exceeded authority.
Sure.
What would the criteria? How would you determine which is the appropriate? How would you determine what the answer to that question is?
The wording of the procedural bylaw, and it says insufficient items for the agenda to justify a meeting, or words to that effect. I don't have it in front of me. And if there were sufficient items for an agenda, and he didn't have either a majority of council agreeing with him, then he would be exceeding his authority. I don't know that because I haven't investigated.
But it doesn't say that the council has to be polled here.
No,
Why-
that's something that he might have done at the time that I suggested. It's done, in my experience, in having worked in municipalities for a long time, it's done quite often.
And I'm not trying to be argumentative, but can you adjudicate based on best practices, or can you simply adjudicate based on what's in the procedural bylaw?
I can come to conclusions based on what effort any councillor makes to comply with the code of conduct or comply with the procedural bylaw.
But if the bylaw says, the test is simply if there's insufficient items or not, that the mayor and clerk can cancel the meeting, then how could you then suggest that there should be a poll of council? I guess I'm sort of trying to reach for the same, I'm trying to get the same information I think that Councillor Elgar is getting, because
It doesn't solve the strict requirement of the procedural bylaw, but it's not a bad idea if you're worried about exceeding your authority.
I agree with you that it's not a bad idea, and it probably is something we should change in the future, but does that make it a relevant fact to investigate based on an integrity review?
Yes.
Okay. So based on improper use of influence by the mayor, the issue that you focused on in your presentation was simply on the press release that related to Councillor Khan's nomination. And I have no knowledge. I didn't go back and dig it out. I'm not sure I have a copy of it. So I don't know whether...
I'm just reacting to
Yeah,
an
yeah, I
allegation.
get it. I just want to be clear. I have no knowledge of whether it was on letterhead or not. But one of the things in the report was the use of a Twitter handle in the social media Twitter world that is Oakville Mayor. And that was one of the suggestions that's inappropriate. That's one of the things that I've received a lot of feedback on. But that's kind of, it's not referred to in your report. You simply focus, it seems, on the nomination document as opposed to the use of a Twitter account with the handle Oakville Mayor, somehow in some minds implying that there's some degree of capacity behind those Twitter posts.
I think, yes, I left that out, and maybe I should have commented on it, but councillors are politicians, and in my experience, some of them have ideas for office in the province or the federal government. There is no way, it's not realistic for me to suggest that councillors shouldn't work in a federal election. For example, there'd be nothing wrong with the mayor turning up at a candidates meeting and being introduced as the mayor and then speaking at a candidates meeting. That's, of course, he's introduced as the mayor. He is the mayor. So there's nothing wrong with that. But writing on a letterhead and using town staff, I think, could be wrong, depending on the degree to which he's done that. I don't know.
But again, part of the debate, it was written about, it's been referred to by, a number of people, and it's become a bit of a debate, and it's something I think would be very worthwhile to have an answer to. Should a mayor, or for that matter, even a councillor, I admittedly use the Twitter handle Councillor Noel, but I'm very careful not to be partisan. But if I think it'd be worthwhile to understand this, whether or not it's something that, it'd be good to get some value out of this report, even if we are going to simply receive it tonight. And one of the things that'd be good to understand once and for all is that an appropriate use of a title to be twittering under the name Oakville Mayor? In fact, it's even gone to his handle is as Oakville Mayor is even more than just your typical handle. It's actually been verified by the Twitter company as being a legitimate handle that is possessed by the Mayor of Oakville. So that was one of the points of the complaint, and I'd be very, I think it's an
Well,
important part.
I mean, this is off the top, and I haven't really thought about it, but it seems to me there's nothing different between having a Twitter handle and being introduced as the mayor. It's just saying, I'm the mayor. It doesn't represent that the town has a position, or it doesn't use town resources. It's just identifying him as the mayor.
Right, but you, in this letter, in this report, you talk about the fact that using a letterhead could be confusing. But what about you, but not using a Twitter handle?
No, it's just identifying who he is.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's all the questions I have for now, Mr. Chairman. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Integrity Commissioner. I appreciate your time.
Councillor Demoff.
Actually, my question was along the same lines as the last thing Councillor Noel was talking about, and it was the use of Oakville mayor or councillor in social media. And I don't know, perhaps this is, I had actually written up to ask for staff to do some kind of report, because social media it entails quite a bit. There's Twitter, there's Facebook, and the lines get blurred, and email as well. Between some people do use their official title and some do not. So perhaps I could get some guidance from you whether that type of recommendation would become better coming from you, or whether I would be better to have staff look at the code of conduct in terms of social media and giving better guidelines to all of us in terms of when to use the official title and when not to.
I mean, that's a hypothetical question, which, I mean, I'd have to know what the tweet is. I'd have to know what the councillor or the mayor is saying on Facebook. I mean, just identifying yourself as a councillor, I don't see anything wrong with that, whether it's on social media or anywhere. That's not the problem.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Duddick.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. Most of the questions I was going to ask have already been asked and answered, but given the fact we're narrowing the scope down to one or two or items of the four that were raised in the context of this preliminary investigation, if we were to go with just one of the four in terms of a recommendation going forward, is there, and I don't want to put you on a spot that it's 5,000, 5,000, but given the fact that we're very, very aware of the public dollars that are going to be expended for this report, should we decide to go forward, is there one that is broader in scope of the either item 1 or 4 that may entail more background work on your behalf versus the other one that would be somewhat, I don't want to say straightforward, but not necessitate interviews and the various other things associated with it?
I would think that the cancellation of meetings would require more interviews than the issuance of a press release. So that probably that gives you an indication.
Thank you.
Councillor Bird.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'm going to follow up on the, I guess it's on page 43, and what we're going to, you've given us an idea of the cost, and I'm trying to put that in value and find out the process. And I guess in your final report, under point number 8 on there, you see you're going to, I am expecting back that you'll have some sort of report, and I'm assuming some sort of a recommendation, which it'll be somewhere between, I guess, do nothing, I found note, or A, a reprimand, or B, a suspension of the remuneration paid to a member in respect to his or her services as a member of council, that would include the mayor, I'm assuming, and in this case, maybe up to a period of 90 days. And you will, presumably, if you find fault, you will make some sort of a recommendation that's, and is there appeal to that? I don't want,
No, but it's council, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It'll be an advice to council. Let's say you come back and we say, yes, we think it's something more than a reprimand, and we would suggest forfeiting your remuneration for maybe 60 days. Would that be something that you would think and would recommend?
That is part of my authority. I can do that, but it's only a recommendation to council, so council would make the decision. So obviously there's no need for an appeal because it's actually council making the decision, not me.
Okay, so it goes to council, and there, as I say, and that decision of council overturning your decision and going for something more, would that be appealable?
I don't believe you can go for something more. I think you have to take a recommendation in terms of suspension of pay.
Yeah,
you have to take a recommendation from me and either accept it or not. I don't believe council has the authority.
There's an element of finality to that. Well, on the other point, you will be presumably in your report for the $10,000, that we're making some sort of a recommendations on some of the questions that have been here today. I mean, we're all kind of pioneering on this. I know I am. And if we can tighten it up, I guess the terms of reference, using of town materials. I know I got charged a couple of years ago by the clerk, not charged, but suggested I had to review my campaign literature because I had inappropriately used a town logo, which was the town crest showed up, and it applied some sort of officialdom to the literature. I respected that and assumed that. I see that with the use of what we're saying with Twitters and email accounts and they just say handles or names or whatever it is, that use of the town logo or the name Town of Oakville or a position within there has to be some sort of rules for that, what is official and what is unofficial. And presumably you'll come back with some recommendations how we can clarify those sort of ambiguities that we have now?
Well, if I'm directed to investigate, I don't know whether I will or not. I mean, depends on my conclusions that arise out of the investigation. But you could direct me to come back with a recommendation as to change the code of conduct to put in these rules that you're suggesting. That could be one of your directions tonight.
Because tonight, I'm trying to get value for the money and what we get for the $10,000 here, and I know that the meter's running on me, so I'll try to be as, and not on me personally, but the taxpayers here, what we may get back if we proceed on. But those sort of recommendations would be extremely helpful going forward. And tonight, a couple of things, questions in response to my colleagues. You said, well, I hadn't thought about it, but let me think about it, or whatever it is. It's that sort of hidden value when you start to get your mind around this, because I don't think any of us, I don't know how many times we've been through this before you have, that we're going to get some sort of extraneous value from you sitting there thinking about it. So that's what I'm looking forward to, the 10 grand coming back.
Through the chair, I'm a member of the Integrity Commissioners of Ontario, which is an association and we meet twice a year and we correspond back and forth. And some of these things, in fact, I learned about the moratorium prior to the election from a meeting that I attended. So that's something that, I can bounce these things off these people, and that's always helpful to me. So that's another value, I suppose. It's not just me.
Okay, thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Councillor Khan, second time.
I just want to go back to an affidavit. And you understand, and obviously you understand, but an affidavit is based on information and belief or personal knowledge, right?
Yes.
And if it's based on information and belief, you have to state the source of that belief in a proper affidavit.
Well, the word affidavit just means that it's a statement that you made that is sworn before a commissioner of oaths. That's the only meaning of affidavit.
Well, there's elements of an affidavit.
There's what?
Elements of an affidavit, of a proper affidavit. Even in here, you say I have personal knowledge or I have reasonable and probable grounds. It's even spelled out in this specified form what those grounds are. The concern I have, if I can ask you to turn to page 38. Paragraph 3, number 3. You see the last line there, the last sentence, or sorry, second last sentence. I do not know if he's referring to Mayor Burton, is using a town-owned BlackBerry. that would also be, I believe, inappropriate. In other words, what he's doing is he's throwing out whatever he can without suggesting that that's true, without suggesting that he's relying on information and belief, without suggesting that he has personal knowledge or the source of that knowledge. It's a free-for-all. He could throw in whatever he wants, and he's asked you to review it. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, it's an allegation, and you're right, it's merely an allegation, but the reason it's under oath is
It's not even an allegation. It's a question.
True. In that case, yes. He has no evidence of that whatsoever, reading this. But the purpose of the affidavit, the reason it has to be sworn is, I believe, and many codes of conduct are done this way because you want to add some formality to a member of the public filing a complaint, so that there's more than just sending in a bunch of paper. So that's the reason it's sworn.
I disagree. It's not just a formality. It's a legal requirement because there could be consequences for lying in an affidavit. And that's stated on the top of this affidavit.
That's true. That's true also.
Not just a technical requirement. There's a legal consequences that flows from this.
Correct.
And you're not allowed to throw out whatever you want without any information or belief.
I don't know about that. He's making allegations, and he's swearing that these are my allegations. I can't take that extra step that you're taking.
I want to go back to the question that Councillor Knoll raised, and I think I was impressed by the way he raised it and also the way Councillor Elgar raised it, is that you say in your report, assuming there were sufficient items to hold, this is going back to the cancellation of the meetings, assuming there were sufficient items to hold these meetings, the mayor likely exceeded his authority and should have had his staff do a telephone poll of council before asking staff to cancel. Okay, you're saying assuming that there were sufficient issues to be discussed at the meeting.
Yes.
You don't know that, though.
I haven't investigated. No, I don't know.
So you don't know that yet?
No. That's
and you're required to investigate whether or not he followed our procedural rules, not to actually implement procedural rules. You don't get to override our own procedural rules and impose yours.
Of course not. No.
Right, but over here you're suggesting that they should do a telephone poll of council, which is nowhere in our procedural rule.
Correct.
Okay, that's all.
Correct.
Councillor Elgar, second time, followed by Councillor Lapworth.
Thank you. Just a quick point. If you go to the affidavit, I heard it brought up about this Twitter account for the Oakville mayor.
Right.
I went and checked. I can't find a Twitter account for Oakville mayor. If you could pull it out and spell out how mayor is spelled here.
What page are we on?
Page 35 of the affidavit itself. It's under number 1.
Yeah,
How do you spell mayor?
it almost looks like M-O-Y, but I guess it's M-A-Y-E-R here.
Yeah, I can't find that Twitter account.
I can imagine why not.
Councillor Lapworth.
Thank you, Mr. Swayze. I was wondering if you'd be so kind as to comment on the relevance, if any, in Mr. Young's statement, which is the first complete sentence at the top of page 39, which follows the following, which is the last sentence on page 38, which says, according to the Oakville Beaver, Councillor Alan Johnston is Max Khan's Riding Association Policy Chair, and Councillor Tom Adams is a Riding Association Director. Period. Roger Lapworth is also helping with the Khan campaign.
You want me to comment on the relevance?
On the relevance, if any.
It's not relevant, and there's nothing wrong with Councillor Lapworth helping with a campaign in the federal election.
Thank you very much.
Councillor Knoll.
Thank you. Let's, this issue around the cancellation of meetings, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Khan, and myself have all raised it. I think we're all trying to get a clear understanding on this. So I just want to be totally clear here. You're entitled to investigate based on our procedural bylaw. Not necessarily precedent, not necessarily common law, but simply our procedural bylaw, correct?
No, I think I take into account the law as well.
Thank you. So in the context of the law, I assume the Municipal Act and other relevant pieces of legislation, are there any sections that relate to the cancellation or calling of meetings that you're aware of at this point?
No, I'm not, nothing comes to mind.
I guess one of the key things in this is, I mean, there's two very important facts. One is, or facts, suggestions is that you've suggested there may have been the mayor may have exceeded his authority, you said likely exceeded his authority, and that he should have had his staff do a telephone poll of council before asking staff to cancel. So let me ask about that statement. Are you suggesting that the mayor may have exceeded his authority in the cancellation of meetings, or that he may have exceeded his authority in not calling the poll? Because I think that's important. So
No, he may have exceeded his authority in canceling the meetings. Period.
So the should have had staff do a telephone poll of council before asking staff to cancel is simply your opinion, and not necessarily what you're hanging your.
No, not at all. I mean, it would help. It's at least shows an effort to try to get council to agree to it.
So your assertion here that he may have exceeded his authority is based on the fact that, based on emails, based on.
No, it's based on whether, and I didn't do an investigation, it's based on whether there were sufficient items to hold a meeting, because that's the wording of the bylaw.
And you don't know whether there were sufficient items or not at this point?
Correct.
And you have to
Correct.
determine that?
Staff indicated that they could postpone them, but I don't know whether there were sufficient items or not.
In terms of using that term sufficient items, does that imply quantity, or does it have an implication on importance or time sensitivity?
I think for the purpose of my investigation, both, but primarily quantity for the strict compliance with the bylaw.
So extending that one step further, so if there were a number of items that were originally scheduled to be on that agenda and the meeting was canceled, that is where you might find fault in that particular case, is that correct? If that were to be the case?
Yes,
Okay.
that's right. Well, I would find that he had exceeded his authority by asking staff to cancel.
I just really wanted to clarify that your suggestion of a possible exceeding of authority is based on that and not the polling of council, because that's where I was getting confused.
The poll of council would have just helped me in my decision whether to what to recommend to council if I found that he did exceed his authority, that's all.
Is the reason, again, on a stretch, Councillor Khan's obviously concerned about a number of these things because he's obviously implicated by virtue of the fact, or he's being implicated, I shouldn't say he is implicated, there's a suggestion of implication on the part of the complainant in terms of the motive for the cancellation of meetings. And by asking this question, I'm by no means impugning Councillor Khan in any way whatsoever, so I want to be perfectly clear because I don't want to get sued. The issue that I'm trying to get to here is that even relevant in this issue? So the reason why he cancels it, the reason why he would cancel in his own mind versus the fact that he canceled it, is that a relevant fact? Or is that just I guess, an input? Because isn't what you're measuring here whether or not he should have canceled the meeting, not why he canceled the meeting?
Well, I believe that one of the emails refers to the election.
But if you were to investigate this further, is that a relevant portion of your investigation, the reason why a meeting got canceled? Or is it just the propriety or the appropriateness of canceling meetings?
I think I'd take everything into account.
Okay, thank you again, Mr. Chair, Mr. Swayze.
Councillor Adams.
Thank you for attending this evening. Just a moment ago, you said something about one of the emails mentioned the election. Are you referring to the meeting that was moved from election evening to the day after? Is that the
No,
one?
I think there was a general reference to the election generally as to the cancellation.
I'm sorry. I'm not sure if your mic is working well, or is it's my...
It's working. I'll speak louder. I believe there was a general reference to cancellation because of the election. It wasn't in reference to any particular meeting. It was all of the meetings, the committee meetings and then the council meeting. There was one meeting, the site plan meeting, that was canceled with no items for the agenda. That was appropriate, obviously.
And you said that there was an email from the mayor to the clerk saying, is there, and I'm paraphrasing because I don't have it, I don't know what it said, but did it say, it said something to the effect of, is there any issue with canceling this set of meetings, whatever this set was?
I don't recall that.
Well, in your on page 33, you say, the second last paragraph, I've reviewed emails provided by the clerk between councillors and staff regarding the cancellation, and it appears that the mayor did initiate the cancellations by contacting staff to see if they would be feasible without affecting town business. And then the clerk's department consulted with all departments and was advised that the committee meetings to be held on April 12th and the council meeting and so on.
Yes.
So there was an email
Saying that, yes.
from the mayor saying, is it okay if we cancel these, or is there going to be any impact to the town business if we
I don't
cancel?
recall if
Or
it was an email from the mayor. I don't think the mayor in any of his emails mentioned the reason for the cancellation. It was a memo from staff.
That's what I was trying to figure out because of the way you had phrased it before. And so
Because he had responded to several of you saying with no reason.
okay, and the clerk's department responded with something to the effect of, there won't be any impact to town business.
Clerk's department did a poll of each department and determined that each department said, yes, we could postpone the meetings.
Which is to say, the clerks through the various departments felt that there wouldn't be an impact to town business, that whatever business there was of a nature that it could be held for whatever it was, 2 weeks to the next meeting. Is that what
They said they could delay.
to understand?
They could delay, yes.
It can be delayed.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Khan.
Is that my third? May I? It's just a quick question here. Earlier when I was asking you some questions, you said that your exact words are that you had no doubt that there were political motivation overtones. If you are called upon to investigate this matter, will that be part of your consideration?
Yes.
Thank you.
Councillor Grant.
Just one thing I don't want to get lost in all of this conversation and clarification and over-clarification is the fact that if you do any investigations, you would be coming up with new considerations that we could look at to apply to our bylaw, because I understand that Councillor Elgar and Councillor Khan are both saying that, there's things that can be done to make this better, stop abuses of the power that people would have in making these affidavits. So part of the bang for the buck that we'd get, to use Councillor Bird's phrase, is that we would then have some more considerations from your department, from your background, as to things that we can do to stop any kind of abuse of power in the future from people.
All I can say is very likely. I don't know what I'd come up with, but probably.
Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
Sorry, I'm not even sure if this is really a question for you or to our staff. It's really a question about, a few of us have said something to the effect of, should we consider this change or that change to our procedural bylaw or our, I can't remember what the other procedure is called now, but the how we act procedure, code of conduct, thank you. would it be more appropriate for our staff to provide comment as opposed to sending it to an integrity officer? What's the appropriate, I mean, we wrote these things, as I recall, originally in effect through our own staff, or looking for guidelines from other municipalities that had them. You didn't write our material.
I made a great many changes to it. I did get involved before you adopted it, and I did, and all of my input was there, and it is there now.
And I'm not sure if, Mr. Lalonde, do you have any comments on this particular issue? What process is the appropriate process for it? Whether it should be part and parcel of an investigation, or whether it should be a separate and distinct request for a report on a set of matters?
I think that as we put together our procedural bylaw, we benefited from input from external sources. I always think there's a benefit in having more eyes look at a procedure than less. I think that if this investigation goes forward, Mr. Swayze's boundaries are very narrow. He has a particular investigation to work through. We would, as we take our next procedural bylaw revision forward, be taking those things into account. So I think that, I know I'm not answering your question directly, but I think if you go forward with the investigation, we will get the benefit of Mr. Swayze's observations on how we might improve it. And we do review the procedural bylaw on a cycle, so that's something that we do as a matter of business.
So when we go through that, it would be, when we go through the process of updating our procedural bylaw, that would be the appropriate time to consider that type of change.
Yes, and as I recall, any of the bylaws or policies that we've brought forward to council that have to do with council code of conduct, council behavior, any of those things generates a great deal of interest, and I think it would be scrutinized very, very thoroughly at that point.
Do we have any more questions from council? I have Councillor Elgar with a motion, I believe.
Yes. After sitting here and reading the report and listening all evening, I personally am concerned that it's not a good use of taxpayers' money. However, I'm more concerned that this can't be a carry-on, like a carry-on camping show. I think we need a final closure to this issue. So I would ask that the members of this council support further investigation related to, number one, improper use of influence by the mayor, and item 4, cancellation of town's meetings prior to the federal election. In my own heart, I believe that the Integrity Commissioner will come back and say there was absolutely nothing done procedurally, everything was above board, but I want to put this to bed, and for the whole council, that we all walk away from this, whatever comes out of this, and also that we can learn from this and also change our code of conduct going forward. So I would so move that recommendation at this point in time.
A point of information. The allegations against me, are they dismissed, or does council have to address them, or does council refer them? He's already said he has no jurisdiction, so how do we deal with that formally?
Well, I'll look to the chair or staff, but I would assume that's off the table immediately.
My understanding through the motion is that the only items 1 and 4 would be investigated. Councillor Duddick.
Mr. Chair, I'd be pleased to second that, and maybe to give some further confirmation or clarity to Councillor Khan and the other question of 3, that 2 and 3 are being dismissed and that we're only going forward with 1 and 4. it just sort of puts it, I know it's understood by us, but again, as you've spoken, the clarity is most important at this point, that people understand exactly what, given the Integrity Commissioner's report, what has been given sort of a gray area or, you know, is given some sort of merit going forward investigation to give clarity to everybody concerned.
That sounds very good.
Councillor Knoll.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. First of all, I want to thank Councillor Elgar for putting that motion forward. I was going to put the same motion forward, and I do appreciate him doing that. A couple of quick points. First of all, a question before I comment. I raised the issue of the whole gambit of social media and Twitter accounts and things like that. That was part of the original complaint. And whether or not there is preliminary evidence to believe that there is any kind of wrongdoing, I'm wondering if that could in fact be added to the Commissioner's response, because I do believe that we need to get some, it was in part of the original complaint. So I think it should be, I think that there should be a response to the use of Oakville Mayor and titles in social media. So I'm curious whether we can, if we can include that, or if the Commissioner would include that as part of his report.
It's not in the motion as it stands. I just wanted to point that out.
Does it have to be in the motion? Because the...
For me to investigate, or for me to make a recommendation to you, yes.
Mr. Chair, through you, the actual procedure is quite clear in terms of what Mr. Swayze is investigating. He's investigating the complaint. So what he comes back with will be dealing with the complaint. If that investigation doesn't deal with an aspect of it that this council wants further information on, I would suggest that that would be the time when you would actually be giving direction for those issues to be reviewed, either by Mr. Swayze or by staff.
Thank you. I need further clarification, though, because the Twitter account issue is in the complaint.
Okay.
But Mr. Swayze did not respond to it. So is that still part of the complaint, and can we ask Mr. Swayze to come back to comment on that?
I will deal with it.
Okay, thank you.
It's part of the complaint. I will deal with it.
Okay. So just my final comments is I, of course, will be supporting this motion. And as I stated when I moved this matter to be referred to the Integrity Commissioner in the first place, I think that when there are allegations, whether you give them any credibility or not, the bottom line is they're allegations, they hang out there, whether they're not responded to, and when closure is not brought to these things, they become essentially a stain on this entire council in perpetuity unless they're responded to and answered. So I appreciate the opportunity to bring some closure to this issue, to determine if there's any kind of best practices we need to put into play in terms of our own procedures. I understand that this will not amend our procedural bylaw, which I think was one of the questions that was being asked, but certainly it will be provided as input into further review of the procedural bylaw. So I do appreciate this motion and look forward to getting this done and this matter closed once and for all.
Councillor Khan, followed by Adams and Duddock.
This was just for information. Given that the allegations against me are now part of this motion, I'll recuse myself from voting on the matter.
Mr. Chair, unless there is a conflict of interest duly declared, no member can recuse himself without leaving the room, and there has been no pecuniary interest declared on this matter.
Councillor Adams.
Sorry, I had a question about the additional follow-up advice that you'd provide for things like our procedural bylaw and the other inputs to our future reviews. And I wasn't sure whether, to what extent the comments that you might make in the future upon creation of the report will satisfy things like our code of conduct around the use of social media, and where our staff are on the issue of creation of a social media policy and to deal with things like Twitter and Facebook and LinkedIn and 600 other social media things that are out there.
Councillor Adams, I appreciate the question. Is this to the motion?
Well, I'm trying to get clarification as to what's included, or what Mr. Swayze thinks he's going to report on, and whether the report is going to deal directly with those issues, or whether you believe this is something that needs to be separated and a separate and distinct request of you needs to be made.
The social media issue has nothing to do with the procedural bylaw. That deals with the procedure of council. It does have to do with the code of conduct. And if there's some appropriate amendment that should be put into the code of conduct, I'll make that recommendation.
Commissioner Lalonde, I think you'd like to add something here?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There is a great deal of work going on in a review of our social media policy. It's being led by Jane Kortemash. I expect you will be getting reports on this throughout the remainder of the year and probably into next year. It's a very large undertaking, and the work that Mr. Swayze does, or the recommendations that he makes, will influence that work.
Thank you for the clarification, Commissioner. Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just to confirm what the next step will be, should council support this motion that's currently on the floor in terms of communication back to Mr. Young, would that be something through you, or would it be something through our office? I just want to, rather than going through a press release, given the individual has filed a complaint, I want to make sure there's something formal that goes back to the complainant.
Yes, well, the report that I make as a result of my investigation will be public, and I would normally send a copy of it to him, the complainant, when you circulate your reports prior to the meeting.
Madam Clerk, did you want to enlighten us further?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair. After every council meeting, there is a follow-up with those individuals who have issues on the agenda. Mr. Young will be advised this week as to what council's determination was, and there is a process that's set out in the procedure. It's on page 43 in terms of when that final report comes in that will be followed.
Councillor Demoff.
I just wanted some clarification on the motion in terms of items 2 and 3. Are we dismissing those items? Okay.
That's correct.
So, okay, thank you.
Excuse me. Excuse me. We welcome the public.
No, out of order.
We welcome the public here with us in chambers, but we can't have you disturbing us, or else we'll have to have you evicted. I'm sorry. Councillor Adams.
Speaking of public, there's a motion on the floor, and I think we've perhaps exhausted ourselves of asking our staff of questions, but we do have an opportunity for the public to make formal comments. Would this be appropriate?
No, Mr. Chair, through you, the item was listed on the council agenda. No requests for delegations were received, so there is no public delegations to this item this evening.
Councillor Duddick.
Thank you. I was just going to concur that also there is a motion that is currently on the floor. Therefore, my understanding, it's restricted to table.
Have we exhausted questions and discussion? We have a motion on the table that we move forward with items 1 and 4.
Mr. Chair,
Madam Clerk.
can I ask through you to the gentleman in the audience, it was his desire to speak to council?
I'm afraid we aren't able to do that. We have the item on the floor.
Waive the procedural bylaw prior to putting the question. So the motion hasn't been to put the question. So I would suggest prepared to waive the procedural bylaw to hear from this one delegation.
Councillor Knoll. We need motion and the question having been called, we have to vote on the motion.
The motion is to put to waive the procedural bylaw to hear one delegation that is here in the council chambers this evening.
Mr. Chair, I could, the motion would have to be voted on tonight, and if indeed, I'm sorry, if indeed it was moved, then the gentleman would have to identify himself, but this report will be coming back to a public meeting at a later date as well, at which time we can ensure the delegation has an opportunity to speak to it.
Councillor Knoll.
Just a point of order or clarification. Could we not move to, could the motion to waive the procedures include a motion to set aside the motion, or set aside the motion and allow the delegation?
Mr. Chair, through you, that would be the reason for waiving the procedures. Normally, council can enable delegations prior to a motion being on the floor. So the waiving of procedures would be to set aside the motion until such time as the delegation came up. But at this point in time, normally, as Councillor Dudek pointed out earlier, the item has been confined to table, and there is a motion on the floor that was under consideration. Normally, the delegations come before that period of time.
Well, let me ask this question. Because this is such a sensitive issue, I really don't want to send somebody to go away who wanted to speak to council tonight. Can you assist? Is there any way that we can enable this through a waiving of the bylaws? It's a simple 10 minutes of our time. If we can find a way to do it, I think it'd be to our mutual advantage to
Mr. Chair, through you, that's why I was suggesting, if you were going to enable a delegation now, you would be waiving procedures and setting the motion aside at this point in time.
Do we have the pleasure of council? All in favor of waiving the rules of procedure?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
3. We have 6 in favor.
All opposed, call vote.
All opposed waiving the rules.
1, 2, 3. So you definitely lost and you never got there. Mr. Chair, any waiving of the procedure would take an automatic 9 vote to go against the procedural bylaw. However, it appears that the actual vote was lost on a tie vote, although I did not see all of the hands come up on the opposed. I believe I saw 6 on in favor.
Having not achieved the 9 necessary.
12 here.
So that did not go through. So we have a motion on the table. Madam Clerk, would you like to read?
The motion on the table is moved by Councillor Elgar and seconded by Councillor Dudek, which was to dismiss claims 2 and 3 in the submission of Terrence Young, and authorize a further investigation regarding claims 1 and 4, and request the integrity officer to bring forward the report in accordance with the procedure.
Mr. Chair, can you please get
I'm
some order
sorry,
here?
Privilege, Chair. Can I just ask that people in the audience be reminded to be respectful, and that they are not allowed to speak when the motion is confined to the table?
Mr. Chair, I move that we recess for 5 minutes.
I'm going to ask you to remove him,
Recess
sir.
the meeting, please.
You're going to remove him.
Recess the meeting, please.
We have reconvened this meeting of council. We have a motion on the table. I ask all in favor.
We got a recorded vote.
That's carried.
No, you've got a recorded vote call for you have to stand.
Councillor Khan. All in favor, please rise. We should.
And how are you voting? So you can read the names out.
Councillor Johnston, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Dudek, Councillor Demoff, Councillor Bird, Councillor Gittings, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Grant, Councillor Adams, and Councillor Khan. And that is carried unanimously. Under confidential discussion items, we have none. Information items. I'm sorry?
The mayor is being called right now.
Under information items, they have been distributed separately and may be brought forward upon request. Seeing no information item requests.
It's not an information item.
Now that we're at the new business stage, we will wait until Mayor Burton returns.
All right, thank you, Council. We're at new business, and I understand we might have a notice of motion. Councillor DeMoff?
Yes, actually, do I read the first part of it as well, the moved by, or just the notice motion? Okay. Whereas the December 2010 report of the Standing Committee on Health and examination of the potential health impacts of radio frequency electromagnetic radiation called on the Government of Canada to support long-term studies on the potential health impacts of exposure to radio frequency electromagnetic radiation, and such studies have not yet been completed. And whereas radio communication towers emit electromagnetic radiation, and whereas municipalities have no jurisdiction over the placement of radio communication towers within their communities, and whereas municipalities have no ability to apply broader consultation with the public than is required by Industry Canada, therefore be it resolved that the Town of Oakville request the federal government to take action to require these towers to have minimum setbacks from any land zoned for residential purposes or any land on which an educational facility, day nursery, or long-term healthcare facility is located. And further, that in the absence of federal action, the federal government allow municipalities to use their powers under the Planning Act to provide minimum setbacks from any land zoned for residential purposes or any land on which an educational facility, day nursery, or long-term healthcare facility is located. And further, that municipalities have the ability to require broader consultation prior to the placement of these towers. And further, that a copy of this resolution be sent to the Minister of Industry, Oakville MP Terrence Young, the Federation of Canadian Municipalities, and the Association of Municipalities of Ontario.
Thank you, Councillor DeMoff. As I understand it, that is seconded by Councillor Duddick. And 1 second. Under our procedure, the notice goes down for the next meeting of council, at which time we'll debate and consider whether or not to adopt the motion. But as your chair, and because this is an item of great concern currently, an emergent concern and an urgent one, I wonder if I could persuade you to waive the procedure to allow us to debate and consider this motion tonight. And I would only ask that if the mover and seconder wish it. In that case, I would suggest that you make a motion to that effect and second it. That's Councillor DeMoff and Councillor Duddick.
And I'll second.
All in favor? Opposed, if any? The procedure is waived. Councillor DeMoff, would you like to speak to your motion? And then Councillor Duddick, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Your Worship. It is an emerging issue, and an emerging issue not just for Ward 2. It's one that I feel quite strongly about in terms of it having an impact on all of Oakville, and especially in established residential neighborhoods in our town. So I do hope that the other councillors will support this motion and that we can send a strong message not just to the federal government but for other municipalities to join us in this.
Councillor Duddick.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would also, sort of dovetailing onto Councillor DeMoff's comments, I know many of you around the table have shared this frustration in terms of siting of towers, and all too often we hear, well, it's not your jurisdiction, it's the federal government. The one thing I think we are so proud of in Oakville is even though we're told that, that doesn't mean we stop, that doesn't mean we just give up. we still go on and try to plead the case and get some awareness to this issue, because as Councillor Demoff rightly indicated, it's not just a Ward 2 issue, it's town-wide, and I think the members of the public, more so than anything, take exception with the fact their voice is never heard in terms of the siting of these particular towers. And so therefore, I'm hoping to garner support around the council table. And I would just like to say that Councillor Robinson and Councillor Johnson gave up a Saturday along with Councillor Demoff and myself, and we had a packed room at Sir John Colborne. The fact people came out on a Saturday is an indication that they're very, very, very concerned, and it wasn't, again, as I say, a Ward 2 issue. So we're looking forward to hopefully getting the support around the table.
Thank you, Councillor Dudek. I have 4 speakers, Councillor Elgar, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Robinson, Councillor Adams. And so I read out all the names so you know you haven't been overlooked or not noticed.
Yes, thank you. Through Mr. Mayor, question is of the movers of the motion, and my concern is that it's maybe a little bit too restrictive on the therefore be it resolved, where you get into educational. I'm wondering if staff could give us even a little bit more of a broader wording, like include everything here, or similar type of, like an add-in, or similar type of zoning, because I'm afraid we may have missed something, which could be very sensitive.
Councillor, are you concerned that the list doesn't include every land use which falls under the category in planning called sensitive land uses? Is that your concern?
That is my concern. I just don't want to narrow it down to the wording. I'd like to broaden it a little bit.
Well then, how about using the term of art from planning, which is sensitive land uses, such as?
But not limited to.
Yes.
Such as, but not limited to.
And the clerk can use her, there is a bylaw allowing the clerk to adjust motions, and with the awareness and consent of the mover and seconder, and all of council indeed, we'll look after that.
And at the appropriate time, I hope they ask for a recorded vote, because this is a good one.
No pressure. No pressure at all. Councillor Knoll.
2 points. One was similar to Councillor Elgar's. I was hoping to remove the term long-term and just leave it as any healthcare facility, but I guess if we're covering it otherwise, then it's fine. The other one is, can we make sure this is copied to those of us who represent North Oakville? We have 2 MPs, lucky us, so if we could include Lisa Raitt in that would be great. And speaking as a councillor who has gone this road before, I applaud you and thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I think it's long overdue, and I'm absolutely excited about being able to support it, and I congratulate the 2 people from Ward 2 that put it where it is right now. But I would, however, like to recommend that maybe we find a way to amend the motion, which would ask the clerks to see if there's any possible way we could get this on the floor of the resolution portion of the FCM agenda on June the 3rd in Halifax.
I can tell you that it's too late.
Well, I'm not sure.
So those of us going can try, but it's certainly out of the clerk's hands.
Your Worship, I don't want to debate this with anybody. We should be trying tomorrow by phone with Ottawa to see if they'll let us get it on.
I will make the requisite effort.
Thank you.
Councillor Adams.
I want to thank both the mover and seconder of this item. It is a town-wide issue. We've dealt with similar issues in Ward 6 a couple of times. Some we've been successful, some not so, and so it's hit and miss, as you know. The one thing that I see that maybe we would like to add in is under your first therefore, where you say to have minimum setbacks, we might also wish to have maximum heights, and or to broaden the framework of planning tools that we might be able to apply. Certainly the height has been an issue as well as the setback, and we should be asking for both, I think.
Well, Councillor, in the controversy that's going on right now, one of the fears is exposure to the EMF, the electromagnetic fields. So the higher it were, the weaker the field would be and the less the exposure. So you're going to get into a push-me, pull-me situation where the solution for one thing produces height, which is, in your ward, was an aesthetic issue, as I recall, over the height. And in their ward, right now what's going on is more concern about the potential harm.
I understand, and yes, perhaps it is aesthetic. However, we have height restrictions on lots of other things. Why not these too?
Well, if they got height restrictions and not setbacks, they wouldn't be happy. So my own advice is
I didn't say remove setbacks. I said both,
no.
please.
If you send a message to the federal government saying, please give me A and B, and they only give you B, and you didn't get A, and they go, well, we gave you something. If you only ask for what you really want, I mean, it's your call, but I would suggest that you're setting us up. If you go after the height, you weaken potentially the concern about the effects. That's just my 2 cents worth. Councillor DeMoff, it's your motion.
Because I was referring to the standing committee report, which was dealing strictly with the health, I would prefer to keep it just as a setback in terms of coming up with the recommendation, because the report dealt with exposure to the radio frequency electromagnetic radiation, and I would have a concern that the mayor brought up as well, that by making it higher, you may, in fact, I know that the residents to whom I spoke, their concern was not so much height as it was the health effects. And if you limit the heights, if there was a possibility the federal government could make higher towers in industrial zones that would go further to give the wireless companies their coverage, then that may be agreeable. So I'm not comfortable adding the height addition onto it.
Okay, so I think, given that it's actually in the mover of the motions and the seconder, I take it, antithetical to the point of their motion, it couldn't be considered a friendly amendment, and I think I would have to call it out of order. All right, any other discussion? Then I heard a request for a recorded vote. If you wish to show your support for the motion, please rise to be named. That would be Councillor Khan, Councillor Adams, Councillor Grant, Councillor Knoll, Councillor Lapworth, Councillor Elgar, Mayor Burton, Councillor Giddings, Councillor Bird, Councillor DeMoff, Councillor Duddick, Councillor Robinson, and Councillor Johnston. I won't call for the nays since there won't be anybody standing. That carries unanimously. Councillor DeMoff, I understand you may have more business for us. Well, then, away you go. Let's see where you get with this one.
Well, I just thought that maybe we could end on a happy note with a congratulations. Yesterday in Toronto, a team with strong ties to Oakville, the Toronto Rock, won the National Lacrosse League's Champions Cup. Over 10 years ago, I arranged for a couple of Toronto Rock players to talk to the students at Brookdale Public School, and I went to my first game, and I've been a season ticket holder ever since. The Rock have their head office here in Oakville. Their owner lives here, and best of all, the head coach and my favorite player both live in Ward 2. So please join me in congratulating everyone involved with Toronto Rock on a great season and a rock-solid championship win.
Well, that's just rock solid, Councillor. Thank you very much. I think that takes us to regional reports and question period. Are there any questions or reports? Seeing none. Are there any requests for reports? Councillor Bird.
Behind the glass here. I have one, and I thought tonight there was rather a long meeting, and we waived the 29 delegates, so I didn't get a chance to respond to the delegation that Miss Mary Saunders presented on the backup beepers. We received the report, so what I'm asking, she came forward with, I think, 5 specific suggestions, and I would ask that staff prepare a report to a future meeting, ASC committee, on the 5 suggestions that she has. And also I'm aware that the staff are trying to arrange a meeting with the 2 major companies that we hear the most complaints from, to see if in fact we can't solicit their cooperation on some of these suggestions. So it's a report back on that issue as per request of the delegation.
Councillor Giddings, can I assume you second the request for a report?
You certainly may.
All in favor? Opposed, if any? It carries. Any other requests for report? Councillor Giddings.
I'd ask that Economic Development staff report back to Planning and Development Council on the methodology, scope, cost, and potential partnerships for undertaking a corporate business survey in Oakville in 2012.
Thank you. And your second?
Councillor Knoll.
All in favor? Opposed, if any? That too is carried. I believe that now I believe the only request left is a request for a move and seconder of consideration and reading of the bylaws. Councillor Grant, Councillor Elgar, that the following bylaws be passed. 2011-24, the bylaw to amend bylaw 2000, sorry, that one got deferred. 2011-37, a bylaw to provide a rebate of taxes for eligible property owners, re ASC item number 2. 2111-43, a bylaw to amend the Town of Oakville's comprehensive zoning bylaw as amended to remove the holding H provision in section 90B from the lands located on the west side of Millstone Drive. 20-1147, a bylaw to dedicate certain land as part of a public highway, North Service Road East, and that is from CSC item 1. 2011-51, a bylaw to dedicate certain land as part of a public highway on Chartwell Road, and that is from CSC item number 2. And 2011-64, a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the meeting of council. All in favor? Opposed, if any? The bylaws are adopted. That ends our agenda. Thank you very much for your time and attention, and we are adjourned.